episode 194, an Encore episode of Leadership in the Cafe. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show, and thank you so much for joining me on this last episode of 2019. It's almost the new year and kind of a special encore episode to present to you today. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Now, really quick, Keys to the Shop has been nominated for a Sprudgie Award for Best Coffee Podcast among many great people, and I am really honored, and the finals are still being voted on. So if you go to sprudge.com/vote, there's a link in the show notes for you to do that also. I would really appreciate your vote for Best Coffee Podcast, and thank you so much for those of you who nominated Keys to the Shop in that category, and also make sure to vote for all the other folks in the different categories of the Sprudgies. A lot of amazing people doing amazing things. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the great folks over at prima-coffee.com. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers, supplying you with everything you need to run a great coffee operation. So if you're looking for commercial equipment from anything like espresso machines, grinders, brewers, under-counter refrigeration, even sinks, you name it. If you need it in your coffee shop, prima-coffee.com is the place to go for all of your needs. They take particular pride in curating the best from all over the world and fitting that equipment to the needs of their clients. Right now, they're running a special through January 31st. If you're a Keys to the Shop listener, you can get 5% off your order. You simply go to the website prima-coffee.com/keys and then use the code HOLIDAY5. That's holiday with a number 5 at the end of it. And that will get you 5% off your order. There are going to be a few restrictions on this, but you'll definitely want to take advantage of this opportunity. It's a very generous offer from Prima. So again, that's prima-coffee.com/keys and the code HOLIDAY5 to get 5% off your order. And I definitely would recommend that you reach out to and work with Prima Coffee for all of your commercial coffee equipment needs. This episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista series from Pacific Foods. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed specifically for professional baristas. And in addition to that, it is designed alongside of professional baristas and with a lot of feedback from the people who are actually using the product. Such a great amount of research and so many critical eyes have been on this product, and that's why it performs so well on the bar. Whether you choose to use the oat, almond, soy, coconut, rice, whatever you might choose on your bar, you can be assured that you have a product that's going to stand up to the heat from steaming, produce an amazing silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on the coffee, which is so important. And it's something that you want your guests to experience in your shop. And Pacific has definitely thought of that when they're designing these. I highly recommend you go to pacificfoods.com to learn more. Follow the link in the show notes. This is a company that cares deeply about the success of the specialty coffee industry and the barista community as well. And products like this and the support they give the industry is just evidence of that fact. So highly recommend you get this in your store. Try it out for yourself. See how you like it. I think you're going to like it a lot. All right, so today I wanted to present something to you that's a little bit different than what we normally do on the show. I don't think I've ever re-aired an episode with the exception of the collection of quotes from Founder Fridays. Today, though, I think is an appropriate time to do it. Episode 194. This is episode 4 from back in 2017, titled Leadership in the Cafe, 10 Steps to Being a People First Leader. And I'm going to play a bulk of this episode for you, and right away you're going to notice that there are some differences. I have maybe today a little bit more confidence than I did back then when I was first starting out. Also, the audio quality is, I think, a little bit different now, better, I would say, than it was back then. But it's still fun for me to go back and listen to some of these old episodes, and especially this one. 10 Steps to Being a People First Leader is such an appropriate theme. You know, we have a total of 278 episodes. That's including shift break episodes. And so There has been a ton of different things discussed here on Keys to the Shop, and it's been such a great experience. But this particular theme is talked about by so many guests, and it's talked about by myself. It is a through line of so many of the topics, and that is the fact that you can have all the right stuff, and you can have the formulas, and you can have the buildings and the staff waiting and ready to go. And if you don't have a leadership style and a leadership presence and mindset and practice that is a people first one, then it's all for naught. You will end up suffering in the end somehow for a lack of the things I mentioned in this particular episode. This episode is one of the more popular ones, at least from back then, and has also been used as a curriculum by at least one listener to the show to teach all of their managers in their multiple stores about leadership. And so I'm really honored to know that, and also honored to present this to you today, because I really believe that this is a message that bears repeating. And as we enter 2020, I think it's something that we need to mull over and apply wherever we are in the coffee retail space as leaders. So without further ado, here is me from 2017. Keys to the Shop, episode number 4, 10 Steps to Being a People First Leader. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Keys to the Shop. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host, and this podcast is all about offering insights, inspiration, and tools to help you become a better coffee professional, to help you grow your career in specialty coffee. And today we're going to get to dig into the subject of leadership and how it affects morale, bar culture, and ultimately the customer's experience, and basically how we can be better leaders in a cafe setting. It's a big subject, and it's specifically geared towards those of you who are in a leadership position right now. You have some authority in the cafe, and or those of you who aspire to be leaders in the cafe. But I also think you can lead from where you are, and anyone who works in a coffee bar can glean something from today's episode. Today, I want to talk about 10 ideas or 10 steps, or however you want to label them, that are going to help you become a more responsible leader, one who really puts people first in the organization. And I think we can all agree that a shop is really only as good and as healthy as its people are happy. And an engaged leadership will create an engaged staff, and therefore that healthy ecosystem, it allows for growth and joy in the workplace that's experienced by everybody, from the owner down to the customers. We're all happy. So it goes without saying that leadership is about caring for, inspiring, and yes, managing people. It's all about caring for them. But we have a tendency to put our best energies into developing our image and the technical part of our job before people. So let me give you a story of my biggest failure in regards to leadership. It's a bit of an embarrassing story, but it illustrates kind of what I'm talking about when I'm saying we put our energies into developing other things, more technical things, before caring for and developing people. I remember when I was a barista trainer at Gimme Coffee in Ithaca, New York, way back in 2004. I was involved in the United States Barista Championships. I was in latte art competitions, and I was kind of full of myself. And I had a lot of pride in my achievements or just in my knowledge, and I viewed my job as this grand and noble cause that, I was to make our coffee the best it could be in all of the stores, which in part is true. But the approach that I had to it was that I needed to get everyone to do things my way in great detail, because if they did, I could just see it. We would be making the best coffee, and we would be the best coffee shop. And so you can see the problem a mile away. I left out caring for people. I wasn't good at leading people,
but I was good at coffee, technically good at coffee. And so it all kind of came crashing down around me when I started visiting stores with a clipboard filled with all of my requirements for what a good barista should do, like even tamping, milk temperature, speed of the particular menu items, all of that stuff. And I would show up unannounced during the rush and just sit there on the side making notes, sometimes not so silently, and nitpicking things and making notes, not helping with the shift, just critiquing. So I can kind of feel like the anger all the way over here in the studio from people listening to this that would just want to rip somebody's head off if they did that to them. It was probably my biggest failure as a leader to date. And I'm positive that everybody else there kind of felt the same way. In fact, I know it. So if you worked with me at that time in my life, I apologize. I'm sorry. I don't know how to make it up to you. But one girl was so sick of it that she penned a 3-page complaint letter to the owner that more or less ripped me a new one for what was correctly identified as an oppressive way of going about training. I was being oppressive and it wasn't fair. Agreed. So now thankfully I got the message and I kept my job. But I also kept that letter, and I kept it for 10 years afterwards because it reminded me that as a person who has authority in the store, and as a leader, I have the power to crush people's spirits, to be oppressive, to neglect their needs as a person, or I can elevate them and I can give them my energies in my ear, and I can be a good leader and help them be successful. So I'm really grateful for that letter and what it meant for, I would read it occasionally, here and there, just to see like, man, that was an interesting time in my life. And it was, I'm better now. I promise. I'm far from perfect as a leader for sure. But, to bring it back around to what I was saying before, it was a good example, this story, of how because I was not good with people, I just avoided it. And I invested instead into the technical part of the job to kind of make up for that lack. We can see this industry-wide. This is not an isolated thing. You see a lot in trade shows and conferences, and when people are starting stores and all around the industry, a lot of energy, tons of energy poured into selecting the perfect equipment, sourcing the perfect coffee, design and branding, all of the host of details that go into starting a store are focused on with fervor. And then kind of as an afterthought, people. We think about that when we have to hire for people to fill the shifts of this thing that we've built. There's not a lot of effort put into the human element of the place. And it's weird because, as an organization, if we're starting an organization, it's assumed that it's an organizing of people and not things. And the focus on and care for people, in my opinion, is of equal or greater value or importance than anything else we do. Because without it, you end up with all the pieces, but no soul, no substance, no life in the organization. So part of the reason I think for this imbalance is that like water goes through a bed of coffee with the path of least resistance and all that, we like to take the path of least resistance too. And for us, that looks like focusing on the stuff and the machinery and the craft and the tasks, things that are just not as difficult as dealing with people and in caring for people, which offers enormous resistance sometimes, and it's hard to deal with. We're not strangers to relationships. I think we subconsciously avoid dealing with it in the workplace. it's easier to try to solve a problem by shuffling the pieces around the board than it is to invest into a person or a group of people. So as a leader, we have to kind of counterbalance this tendency to avoid the messy relational side of leadership with focus and intention. Otherwise, I think we naturally gravitate towards not dealing with it at all. For most of us, though, our issues with engagement, our and misplaced priority, they seem to be pretty manageable and benign in comparison to more extreme cases out there of neglect and sometimes of outright abuse of staff. What we neglect looks harmless. And because it's not as obvious, we tend to allow it. We tend to let it stay in the mix. And it's kind of like defects in a lot of green coffee. The effects of the allowances that we make for these things are experienced downstream by the staff and the customers, and they have a negative impact on their experience of our store. The solution to defects in green coffee is investment, development, and higher standards at origin, and the solutions to these leadership issues are the same. So it starts at origin. It starts with leadership investing in and developing higher standards for how we work and act to improve the quality for those at the other end of the organizational supply chain. That would be baristas and people working under your authority as a leader. And that's a big responsibility. So how can we address these things? How do we lift morale if it needs to be lifted? How do we create that happy and healthy culture and be responsible leaders who are putting people first in our leadership? And how do we do it for the long haul of the business? There are 10 ideas that I want to share with you that I believe are just time-tested and proven methods for gaining a healthy organization over time. They're not easy. They're actually kind of difficult, each in its own right. But if they're practiced with intention, I think you're going to see fruit from them. So let's look at these 10 practices and break them down practically. So how they affect the cafe, what it means to employ this in the cafe, and why they're important. So first, let's start with the first one. Number one, we have to set a clear vision with goals and expectations. So what that means is you as a owner or a leader have to know why you're doing what you're doing. Now, immediately, a lot of you are thinking about Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why, where he talks about how people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I'm a big fan of that idea. It comes out here in that baristas don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. You have to get buy-in from your staff for the greater vision. You have to know why your shop is there. What's the bigger vision of the store? Is it just to make coffee and make money? It's not very inspiring. I think you need something bigger than the immediate task at hand in order to get buy-in from people. We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And so setting a vision for your company from the outset is of paramount importance. And then having goals and expectations means you outline kind of a roadmap of how you're going to get there. If you just set up shop and expect that you're going to accidentally stumble into the fulfillment of your vision, then, well, that's just not going to happen. So what you need is a plan for each position in the store, a barista, a head barista, a trainer. What do these people do in the store and how does it relate back to the vision? And what are the expectations of that role in the store? Now, each person who signs up for that role, they know this is what I do. Here's how it relates back to the vision. This is why it's important for me to do these items on my list of responsibilities. That is a great way to start as an employee, knowing ahead of time that you're on the journey to something great that is bigger than yourself, and there is an actual roadmap on how we're going to get there and how all the pieces fit together. So that's step one. Set a clear vision with goals and expectations. So the second idea is that you have to have systems. You've got to have systems for informing people about policies and procedures, for skill development through a training manual. This means having checklists, standard operating procedures. This means that you have to think about what the questions are going to be before they're asked. Anybody who's been involved in writing a manual knows that you kind of have to create this mind map, attaching different points, how they relate. Like you could start with the cafe outside the bar. Condiment bar would be something attached to that part of that mind map. The windows, the chairs, the tables, those are all part of the customer area of the cafe. And you have to have a procedure or a detailed policy or procedure for dealing with how to maintain that. Also, you need to know how to get people trained up to do their job well. Anybody who signs up to work in a coffee shop wants to learn how to make coffee. And I think it's such a funny thing to say, but if your training material and your training regimen is not created in such a way that allows for continuous growth, even if it is really robust right in the beginning, then people will start to lose interest and wonder, am I good at my job? We have to build a system that allows people to progress in their skill over time. And that really creates a feeling of fulfillment and a sense of pride in one's work. That goes for the manuals as well, the checklists and the procedures. If you know what done looks like, then when you're done, according to the definition set in the manuals, you can just be proud of what you've done. I know the feeling that I got when I was closing a store and I look at the store before turning the alarm on and locking the door. I would look back at my work and know that according to the list, and I know, that I did everything well, I feel satisfied with my work. And that's great. That's a great feeling. But if you don't have a list and there's unclear expectations about what done looks like or what closing a store looks like if it's done well, then you're robbing people of a sense of satisfaction that's going to really drive the happiness of that individual and ultimately is going to negatively impact the culture of your bar. So you have to employ systems for skill development and procedures and policy, all of those things, and be detailed so people can know how to do their job well. That's step 2, idea number 2. Step 3 is, now that they know what's expected, what done looks like, and they know what that means for the vision for their role as a barista or trainer or whatever they do, you got to supply the tools and resources and opportunity to do the work well. So let's just start out by saying that this section is not going to address wages. Let it be said that you should be paying people a good wage, a fair wage for their work. Now, based on where you are in the world, that may look one way or another, but we're going to operate under the assumption that you're not ripping people off, you're not bouncing checks to your employees, but you're providing them with fair pay for a day's work, okay? So let's go from there and say, with that as the baseline, that there are the other practical things that you need in a cafe to supply your staff with. Okay, so let's look at what this is. Supplying the tools and resources is essentially like if you expect people to clean the windows well, but the towels are leaving lint everywhere, then you need new towels. That's small. That's a small thing you can provide people with. If you expect people to have drinks out at a minute and a half for a 12-ounce latte, but the steam wand is malfunctioning or, one of the group heads is down, well, then that needs to be fixed or being on its way to being fixed, or else that expectation you can't hold people to that. Supplying people with the tools they need to do the job is surprisingly overlooked. And I do this. You know what? I'm not perfect at it. And we all are at different levels of being on top of the details. You have to understand that when you work day in and day out as a barista, the littlest things make the biggest difference to you. If you have pens that don't work, all the way to if the group head on the espresso machine is malfunctioning, all those things make a big difference. And they are kind of a barometer that a barista will use in the back of their mind to determine whether or not their manager or the owner cares enough about them and their world, or empathizes enough with what they do daily to buy them a pen that works, or to let them know the espresso machine is going to be fixed. I know it's really a pain. I apologize. Or to just fix it if you can right away. There is a lot of rapport to be built by supplying people with the resources they need, but you also have to know ahead of time the state of your cafe and what you need for the job to be done correctly. And it's not just tools and resources for the job, it's also opportunity. So if you're scheduling a shift and you don't leave enough time in the shift for people to complete this enormous checklist of things that you've dreamt up for a perfect cafe, then you're kind of doing what I did at Gimme Coffee, which is you're enforcing an unrealistic expectation during a critical time that is a little tone deaf to the situation the barista is experiencing. You have to provide them with opportunity time-wise to do the work well. So if you have to schedule a little bit more overlap between shifts to provide a buffer so that those lists can be done, great. Or you can reinvent the way the list works. We've done both things at Senergos in order to make the work manageable. And it's a living document. Those checklists and those standard operating procedures, those are living documents. Those are things that change according to the need of the staff and the business as it grows. So don't think of these things as hard and fast, static things. I like what Danny Meyer said in his book, Setting the Table, which you all should go read right away. When he was talking to one of his restaurant managers about stringently enforcing a rule about minimum number of guests at a table, I think. And he said, our rules exist to be broken for the benefit of our customers. And I think as a leader, you need to realize that the rules you make also can be and oftentimes should be broken for the benefit of your staff. That's step number 3. Supply the tools and resources and the opportunity necessary to do the work well. Okay, so first, set a clear vision with goals and expectations. 2, you have to have systems for skill development and initial training with manuals and checklists and policies and procedures. People need to know what done looks like and that they've done it well. Number 3, you have to supply tools and resources and opportunity to do the work well. Number 4 on our list of 10 things that you need to be a responsible and people-first leader in a cafe is you have to be present and share in the work. Now, I know that not all of us can be in the store all the time. If you're just one person and there are 30 employees, you need to delegate authority somewhere to be a present representation of authority. But being present as a leader or having leadership present on the shift is really, really important because it shows that you're there for their benefit. You're sharing in the work, and there's no better way to build trust with another person than to share in the work with them. So you get to field questions, you get to offer assistance, you share in the victories and the defeats. It's a great thing as a leader that is not as utilized as you might think. Don't be that manager that just sits in the office and doesn't partake on the bar. I manage managers, so I'm removed from the cafe by one position, but I still like to help on the bar where I can. Now, I'm not as good on the espresso machine as I used to be. simply by virtue of, getting rusty from management. However, I do clean a mean dish, and I can ring up customers. I can bust tables. I can do all of these things, change trash out, take it out for the baristas. It's a gesture that shows that I am not above getting my hands dirty. Just because you've got a position of leadership doesn't mean that you've graduated from work. Okay? So step 4 is present leadership. Be there and share in the work. Number 5 on our list is to give people individual attention and actively listen to them. Treat them like an individual. A person is unique. They might belong to one group or another in your mind, but they are a unique individual. One of the things that I really don't like is all of the talk about how you have to manage the millennials this way or that way. If you've subscribed to that kind of thinking, you're going to miss opportunities to tailor your leadership to the individual, and you're going to miss your opportunity to truly care for that person. You're robbing them of the benefit of good leadership, and you're robbing yourself of the benefit of helping out and being an asset to the organization in that way. So treat people like the individuals that they are and listen to their concerns. Be active in pursuing the knowledge of who they are at work. So there's a book called It's Okay to Be the Boss by Bruce Tulgan. I love that book because it's just very straightforward, simple advice about strong, empathetic, caring leadership. And one of the things that he talks about is getting to know who people are at work. Do you know what drives your staff? Do you know how they respond to one form of communication over the other? This is part of being a leader. Managing people and leading people is all about tailoring your approach to the individual. Just as much as you can't apply one recipe to every single coffee and expect it to be at its peak on the single origin selection of your espresso. So we dial in our shots every day, and we make adjustments here and there based on what's happening. But somehow we think that we can manage and lead people as if they are just static. And they'll be the same on Friday as they were on Monday, so I don't really need to be engaged or pay attention. Definitely not true. Manage people as individuals. It's tough, sure, but you have to get to know them and lead and manage according to the knowledge that you have over time. So that's step 5. So number 6 on the list is that you have to plan your day around intentional affirmation and specific guidance. Okay, so plan your day around intentional affirmation and specific guidance. So let's say that you've gotten to know your staff well. You share in the work. You've supplied them with their needs. You've gained their trust. Now you know that you can offer specific and helpful feedback that will make a big impact in their lives. You have to strike a balance, though, between affirmation and guidance, or, basically critique. It's easy to focus on the negative and be vocal about it, and then silently enjoy when things are working well. But you have to speak up. You have to take initiative to tell people what a good job they're doing in a specific way. Rather than saying, you're doing a good job, keep it up, you can say, you're doing amazing at getting the dishes knocked out really fast and well. Okay, not the most exciting thing you could hear from somebody. It's not necessarily a love note. But if somebody tells me that, it makes me feel like they're paying attention to what I'm doing on the bar. They know that I just did this thing. That goes such a long way to making me trust that individual, because I know they invested attention and then they intentionally followed up and told me about it later. But you know what? The opposite is also true. You can just praise people all day long and never offer any guidance or critique. And I think that's just as negligent because people want to get better. I think if you don't guide people and you don't let them know how they can improve, then again, I'm using this term, you're robbing people, but you really are robbing them of the opportunity to get better. And that's part of your job. And it might not be comfortable, but you're just going to have to lean into it. So whether you feel a sense of discomfort from praising people or from critiquing people, lean into it. Give them specific and intentional affirmation and guidance as often as you can. So that's step 6. Let's review with what we've already gone over. Step 1 is you want to give people a clear vision with goals and expectations for their job. Number 2, develop systems for standards, policy, training, all of those things, so people know what a good job looks like. And number 3, supply the tools and resources to do the job well. Number 4 is you have to be present and share in the work that happens on the bar. And number 5 is that you have to give individual attention, manage people as unique individuals, and listen to them, get to know them. And number 6, plan your day around affirmation and specific guidance. Give people the opportunity to grow and encourage them whenever possible. So number 7 on the list is we have to talk about the work while we're at work. And what that looks like is instead of just avoiding talking about the lists and the dishes and the bussing of the tables, embrace the idea of simply asking about what's been done, what can we do, are we missing anything? Hey, why don't you do X, Y, and Z, and I'll do ABC over here. We're sort of giving each other permission to collaborate and focus on the work while at work. You know, what an idea. We tend to avoid it and talk about anything else. And that's fine. I like what, Ryan Soder, who is in episode 2 on workflow, has set up for us, where there's a list of things that are priorities, sort of a cascading list of priorities that there are to be done. And at the end, Ryan's written that we're to high five and chill. I like that because it gives you the permission to, hey, you got everything done. Now it's okay. It's fine. Relax. But anytime anything else on the list comes up as a need, we start back at that thing and we work our way back down. So talking about work means keeping each other accountable. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to start that conversation. And people will follow suit. But just be consistent with talking about the work when you're at work. Now, number 8 is to give feedback genuinely and follow up. If you've been doing all the steps we just outlined, you are going to have already given feedback to people throughout the day. That's the beauty of this. When you sit somebody down for an official form of feedback, like a review, nothing you say should be a surprise to them, whether positive or negative. It's just kind of a more official format for, having a paper trail, kind of an arc of their career at your store. The worst is when you're blindsided and communication hasn't been happening and you find out that you've been doing this one thing that is wrong for the last 6 months and nobody has told you. It makes you feel like nobody could be bothered to tell me or was even, cared at the time. But now that it's time for review, all of a sudden people care. So yeah, that's not very fair at all. Better that people are communicated with over time consistently, and then it's just kind of brought up again in the review, and it's fine. And it works out well, but it has to be genuine. Another aspect of this that I think we fall in is we can give people praise that is insincere, especially when we don't know how well they're doing. We like to pretend that we know how well they're doing. So what that looks like is, let's say that you are a manager and you work the opening shift. Okay? For the last month or two, you have not seen this one person very much at all. maybe just in transition. Hey, how are you? Hope you have a good shift. No news is good news. And so you just kind of assume that things are fine. Now, when you come to review this person, you realize, man, I don't really know what to say about them. I think they're doing fine. And so you just sit down with them and say something like, well, how you feeling, man? Great. Okay, great. Well, I think, you're doing great. There's no complaints. I mean, customers love you. People like working with you. So, I mean, just keep up the good work, and we're going to give you a 25-cent raise. So that's in the book. So good work. And it just it's so insincere, because and they know that you don't know. You have to be there. Again, be present, share in the work, or find a way to get there. Yeah, if you work in the morning time and they work in the night, then it's hard. But you can't give somebody a review or feedback unless you know what to give them feedback on. So again, that's step 8. Make sure that you are able to give genuine feedback and follow up with that feedback too. The one thing that happens, even if you give great feedback, we sort of say, okay, man, good luck. Just take that advice and you're on your own. Now, this is where coaching comes in. This is where follow-up comes in. If you've done all the steps before this, you've probably got some rapport with the staff member. So you can kind of follow up with them in a couple of days and see where they're at with the things that they needed to work on. And that is showing that it was more than just you, shooting your mouth off in the review. It was, no, I really mean I want to see you through to a successful end. So that's step 8. Now, step 9 of our 10 steps to be a people first and just responsible leader is they have to foster an environment where people are comfortable in giving you feedback as a leader. That's a tough one. Sometimes I think we can be of the opinion that we are above critique, at least from people that we manage or the people that we lead. We feel that sometimes if we open the door to criticism, that would lead to insubordination, and is that threatening my authority? I get that, and I've felt that too. I will admit it. I'm sitting here raising my hand in the air. You can't see me, but I've been there. That's a very insecure thing to think, though, and especially if you act on it by not getting feedback about your performance as a manager. The only people that can really give you feedback about your performance as a manager or a leader is not you. It's not your significant other. And often it's just not your boss. It's the people that you manage and lead. And if you've been doing all of these things that we've been talking about well, you're not going to open the door to somebody abusing this time of feedback. Maybe there's somebody out there that would, but it's unlikely that people would just go crazy and just take advantage of this time for anything other than just giving you honest feedback so that you can do better, because you are an individual too. You're not some robot that is supposed to value everyone else and be perfect. Everybody is in community in the cafe. We work and we have different responsibilities, and your staff that you lead, they know your failures, they know your successes, and you know what? They want to see you succeed too. Because when you are good at your job, it makes their job easier. And it makes the whole thing run smoother. And I know that when I've requested feedback from the managers that I manage, I have received great information that has helped me do a better job with my responsibilities as an operations manager. So that's a big pill to swallow, maybe for some of us, but once you get that rolling, I think you're going to find it very valuable. So let's run through these again, just as a reminder. And these kind of follow a linear line, kind of a way of thinking, which is it goes from maybe the first step that you should be doing to the last step, each one building on the other. So number 1, set clear vision with goals and expectations. Number 2, set up systems for skill development and training with manuals, checklists, standard operating procedures, all the things people need to know about to know what done looks like, what a good job looks like at your store. Number 3, supply tools and resources and opportunity to do that work well. Number 4 is, be present in the shop, share in the work, build trust by sharing in the victories and defeats and all of that. Number 5, give people individual attention and treat them as individuals, because they're not just a part of a larger group based on a stereotype. They are unique individuals and should be valued and listened to and led as such. Number 6, you have to plan your day around intentional affirmation and specific guidance, and strike a balance between critique and praise, and do so with specificity and intention. Number 7, talk about the work when you're at work. Make the task and the thing to be done in the cafe just a natural part of how you communicate with each other day in and day out. So we're all keeping each other accountable, and it's just natural and not somehow weird to bring up work at work. Step 8 is give feedback to people genuinely based on knowledge, not a guess, and then follow up with people to coach them into success with the things that you offer as feedback. Then number 9 is to foster an environment where people are comfortable enough to give you feedback. You have to ask for that feedback and then just act on it. Now, not everything that people say is going to be entirely, actionable, but there's going to be a lot of things that people offer as critique and feedback that is going to be useful to you as a leader. So the final idea, the final step in these 10 steps is to create space for yourself to take stock and review where you are in this whole process. We are busy people. It can get really crazy, and it doesn't really help, according to some studies, that coffee negatively impacts short-term memory. But we need to plan things more when we're busy. We need to carve out space to see, like what David Allen says in his book, Getting Things Done, take a 30,000-foot view of where you are in the landscape of your work. Take a look at these past 9 ideas, these 9 steps before this one to say, like, where am I when it comes to talking about the work? Like, where am I in relation to treating people as individuals? And as we've been talking about this, there might be some things that you're just thinking, out of all these things that we've been talking about, there's this one thing that I really need to focus on. And I know, right in my heart, convicted about that. Great. So now's the opportunity to make a plan, create space on a regular basis, whether it's half hour once a week at the beginning or end of the week. I would encourage weekly, or even like 15 minutes a day at the end or beginning of your day, depending on what your schedule is like. If you're not carving out space for yourself, for reflection on your own performance, and to kind of brainstorm and plan out how to make this stuff a real part of your work, it's never going to get done. You have to schedule it, you have to make room for it, and then act on it. So that wraps up the 10 ideas that we can employ in our cafe to become people first and responsible leaders. I would encourage you to be patient with the process. When you employ these things in your practices as a leader, not everybody is going to react right away. And it's going to be a long process, especially if you've gone pretty far down the road in your cafe without doing these things. it's a big ship to turn around. And you just need to give people grace, give yourself grace. You need to be patient with the process, like I said, because relationships can be a difficult thing and they offer a lot of resistance. But this is the right thing to do, in my opinion. This piece of the puzzle for a cafe turns businesses around. Without this, a business will easily sink. And, the destructive tendencies of focusing on other things rather than people is seen in many a cafe's failure all over the industry. So I would encourage you to start putting these things into practice. Make a plan with yourself and with a management team or, the leaders. Share this episode with them and see if these ideas really are something that you're going to want to put in practice in your cafe. I think you'll find that they create a really healthy and happy culture in your cafe. And when you've got happy employees, everybody wins.
All right. Well, I really hope that you enjoyed listening to that again. If that's your second time or third time listening to it, I really hope that it struck you differently now that you are in maybe a different place in your career. You're in a different store, a different position. Things like this, when you hear them again, you're thinking, oh, you know what? That reminds me. Back when I heard this the first time, I wanted to do XYZ. Well, now I'm actually in a position to do something about it. So I hope that this is kind of inspiring some new actions for your new position in life. It makes me really curious about what's changed in your life over, past 3 years since first listening to this episode. Maybe if you have the opportunity, I know you're all super busy, you could email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. If you have listened to this episode when you were first listening to Keys to the Shop back in 2017 when it first came out, and then you just heard it again, how is it striking you now? What is it that's different about the way you're hearing it and the way you want to apply it now? I'd be really curious to know that. For me, that happens all the time with books, and I listen to, podcasts, and they strike me differently where I happen to be in that time. So if this is your first time listening to that, I hope that you got some great value from it too. I can't think of a better way to enter into the new year than kind of dedicating ourselves to being people first leaders, because this business is all about people and serving our customers and serving those who we're responsible for as leaders. And as we employ the things mentioned in this podcast, we're going to find a lot of joy, fulfillment, growth, and thriving in our businesses. And that's exactly what I want for you in the new year. So thank you for joining me on this Encore episode. I hope you have an amazing new year. Thank you so much for all the support over the past 3 years on the show. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.